Oh,
It's okay.
yes. Now everything is frozen again.
Now? No. Or maybe it's the connection. The internet connection. Yeah.
All
Ah,
right.
okay, I'm moving. Okay. This is good. Um, we are only three people here today.
Wow, you're the
So
essence of huge.
we talked a little. We had our meditation and motivation for the session, and that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, for
So,
today.
because Marius wrote me, you would have a kind of a discussion group beforehand, and
Yes, but not today.
not today.
Not
There
today.
was because I was wondering what would you discuss if we hadn't talked about anything yet. But he said he would talk about some administrative things. You would talk about some administration things? No, no.
Administration, what kind? How the course is going to be?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. He wrote you were going to discuss some administration things. So anyway, no questions in other words from this conversation.
Okay.
Because he said that you would have discussion group beforehand, and
Yeah.
then if there's any questions from this, then this can be answered afterwards when I give my little talk. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That is going to be, I don't know, for the next session.
Okay. So I think the other two people I saw before also, isn't it?
Yes. He's Andras.
Hi.
Andras?
Andras.
Andras, sorry.
Andras. O or R in the beginning?
O.
Oh, Andras.
Yes.
Kind of thing. Okay. And what's your name?
My name is Andrea.
Andrea. I don't hear you very well somehow. It's a
Yes,
little
sorry.
how do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, cool. So wonderful.
We didn't solve yet the problem with the mic, but it's going to be solved.
Okay, so you just did a motivation, yeah? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So then the idea seems to be that we are talking about ethical discipline, concentration, and wisdom. Yeah. So I said to Marius, with this we are definitely leaving the Discovering Buddhism. There's no such module in Discovering Buddhism. So therefore, this idea of this, so these three things are called the three higher trainings: the higher training in ethics, the higher training in concentration, and the higher training in wisdom. And so, where does this show up in the Lamrim? Yeah, I think you have talked about the different motivation levels of the Lamrim. That there's an initial level where you are aiming at gaining a good rebirth. There's a middling level where you're aiming at liberation from samsara. And then there's the final level of Mahayana, where you are actually aiming at complete enlightenment for the sake of all living beings. So, which is, of course, what we try to emphasize in the Tibetan tradition, as the Tibetan tradition is Mahayana. So, we actually all aiming at complete enlightenment, and everything else is in that context. So, within these three levels, the three higher trainings are discussed in the middle level. It's a teaching of how to get liberated from samsara. So you get liberated from samsara by ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And so this is so because samsara is made of our afflictions, making us engage into activities. And this kind of afflictions are such that if we engage into activities with afflictions, then this leaves contaminated karma. And this karma will bring about another rebirth. And that's the cycle of samsara. So you're taking a birth. Within that, you take a body, but you also take a mind. That mind is full of afflictions. These afflictions, again, engage into actions. These actions leave karma. Due to this karma ripening, there's another rebirth, where you take another mind, which is full of afflictions, which creates karma, which generates another rebirth, and so forth. So this is the extra-samsaric situation. So if you want to get liberated from this, what you want to get liberated from is the afflictions. You could say you want to get liberated from karma, because karma is that what drives us into another rebirth, but the karma is produced by the afflictions. So you need to get rid of that, what produces the karma. And then, so the afflictions are talking about states of mind. So the afflictions are defined as states of mind which are disturbing the mind, makes the mind unpeaceful, kind of destroys happiness, stops you from enjoying happiness and so forth. Experiencing happiness and so forth, and creates all these karmas. So what is this kind of phenomenon that makes the mind disturbed or unpeaceful? It is kind of attachment, desire, jealousy, envy, then anger, hate even, then also pride and arrogance is disturbing the mind. So all of these things are making the mind unpeaceful, leading to all kind of strange behaviors, verbally, physically, in our thoughts and so forth. And this is the actions, these kind of thoughts, this kind of words, this kind of physical actions. And when these actions are done, when the words are said, the action, when, for example, the words are said, the action is over. Yeah, so the action itself is over. So the Sanskrit word for action is karma. Karma actually means action. So when we talk about karma ripening and so forth, this is a little bit inaccurate, but it is done like this, and it's a normal way of talking in the Dharma. Actually, karma is the action itself. The action itself is over the moment you have, for example, ended the words. So there's nothing that can ripen from this action because this action is done. And there's also nothing that you cannot purify this action because the action has happened and will never go off the record. This simply happened. But what is happening? What's going on is that when the action is over, it leaves a residue in our mind. Yeah, some kind of waste, let's say. Yeah? So there is some leftover from this action. The action itself is over, but what is left is a so-called karmic imprint. So imprint is already kind of like having a stamp and then kind of stamping on something or printing something on a paper. So this is one of the images that is used, but it's just an analogy. It's not what's actually going on, but an image that is used is the mind being a paper, and then the different actions under the power of the afflictions are leaving all kind of impressions on this paper, and in the end you have all this mess on this paper. So these imprints later on, when they meet the right conditions, are ripening. And so for taking a rebirth, the right condition is that another affliction is actually generated that activates that karma. So there is afflictions generated during our life, like attachments, for example, attachments to our body or to our character and so forth, to ourselves. And then this leads to intensified attachment during the death process, when you're losing the body and when you're losing yourself. And then there's a strong attachment that is ripening a karmic imprint. And my understanding of it right now is that it is simply the wish to live, to be alive again, that ripens such a karma. And then it takes, this karma has then the power to propel your mind into yourself, your mind, into another rebirth. So there's an affliction there as well, at the time of death, actually activating this imprint. So there's an affliction that generates the karmic imprint, and there's an affliction activating the karmic imprint. So it's really all about getting rid of the afflictions. If we get rid of the afflictions, we get rid of samsara. So wanting to get rid of samsara is the level on which the three higher trainings are taught. They are taught in order to be able to get rid of the afflictions. So the afflictions themselves are these many different forms that I have just kind of touched on. There's many more, of course, like attachment, anger, and so forth. And what the Buddha is describing is that the actual source of all this affliction is one root affliction. It all comes from one thing. And this one thing is a misunderstanding about how we exist, who we are. Yeah, so it's not just a not understanding who we are, but instead we are projecting a fake reality, a fake idea about who we are and what we are. Yeah, so the ignorance is not just not knowing, but it's not knowing what is the reality, but it's replacing it by a perception of ourselves that has nothing to do with reality. And due to that, all the other afflictions are unfolding. So that means if we could if we could remove this mind that is misperceiving how we exist and how actually the whole universe, our whole world exists and so forth, if you could remove this ignorance, then none of the attachments or anger or pride or arrogance or jealousy would rise again. And therefore also there would be not these factors which are generating karma and activating karma. And therefore there would be no more rebirth. There would be existence, we would be alive, but no longer in the form of samsaric rebirths. So from that point of view, birth as in samsara is birth, and rebirth that would end. So that's what the three higher trainings are aiming for. So as the three higher trainings are aiming for getting liberated from samsara and this uncontrollably reoccurring cycle of rebirth, in the end, the three higher trainings are there in order to destroy this ignorance, which is this root affliction generating all the other affliction, generating karma, generating rebirths. So therefore, it's not surprising that one of the three is the training in wisdom, because wisdom is the counteracting force to an ignorance. If you understand the actual situation, then the misunderstanding will dissipate, will go away. And this is very clear. We have many examples of this in our daily life. So if we think, as trivial as if we think the meeting is at 9:30, and then several people point out to us that it's 10:30 and point out that there was an email sent around, and we check the email and it says 10:30 in the email, we read that, then our idea that it's at 9:30, which is a misconception, a not knowing of reality, is just gone. We replace it by knowing. And this is a general interaction between ignorance and knowing, that knowing is very strong because it's standing on the foundation of reality, while ignorance or not knowing or misunderstanding is very weak because it is standing on nothing. It is completely fantasizing. It's not like that. So you can easily, if you understand the truth, you can easily replace the lie or the misunderstanding by a wisdom. So this is why there is this higher training of wisdom. This is what it's all about in the end. It is this which is the antidote to the ignorance that is the root affliction generating all samsaric experiences. Again, this is an ignorance about how we exist. We have a misperception of ourselves. We do not understand how we actually exist and so forth. Due to this, all the afflictions arise and so forth. So there's no surprise that there is this higher training of wisdom as one of the three higher trainings leading out of samsara. So this wisdom is something that you first need to be introduced to. Then you need to study about it, you need to hear about it, you need to read books on it, you need to discuss with others, you have to have maybe a teacher that introduces you to this and is very skilled in presenting the topic and so forth. Then you get a certain idea. And then you have to reflect on this topic in order to own all of this, what you have learned there, what you have studied there, that it becomes your own thought, that you have really played with it, you have really checked it, you have questioned the presentation. And in this way you gain an understanding and you get a firm understanding. But while you can get a firm understanding, and you could hold this, for example, if somebody else would debate you on that, would put this into question, what you hold there as wisdom, even if you have this firm, it is still staying on a certain superficial level of being intellectual. So what you need to do is you need to get this understanding, this wisdom that you have generated there on a deeper level by meditation. Yeah. So the Tibetan word for meditation is gom, which is not really kind of meditation. Meditation has something about medias, going to the center or to go to the middle and so forth. Yeah. So that's more concentration actually. But the Tibetan word for meditation is gom, which has to do with getting familiar with something or cultivating something. Yes, cultivation. So what we're trying to cultivate in meditation is a correct mind opposing the wrong mind. So this is very clear with regard to wisdom, cultivating it in order to counteract ignorance. But in the same way also you can cultivate love to counteract hate, for example. Or you can counteract an understanding of that a certain object that you are desiring has many, many drawbacks and is actually half as clean or wonderful as it appears to the desirous mind. So you counteract this longing for a beautiful, radiant object by understanding more the reality of it, how it is actually quite ordinary, or even worse, even disgusting. It could be disgusting. This attachment is very interesting. It's able to see disgusting things as being very beautiful. So by coming back to the reality, you can actually pop this idea. So there is this counteracting by cultivating an antidote or the exact opposite of that mind that you want to get rid of. And so this needs to be cultivated in order to get to a deeper level. So this is so because our afflictions and especially ignorance is something that is very much ingrained into us. So for the moment, what we have cultivated is the afflictions. They are not intellectual. They are deep down there. They are our direct reaction when we go into a situation. The first thing that pops up, what comes up in our mind without our planning or thinking about it, is some kind of immediate reaction out of the affliction. So they are on this level of being very much integrated. Our wisdom is not. So we need to first generate an understanding by studying and so forth, which is referred to in the teachings as a wisdom from hearing. And then we need to gain that what we have heard here, what we have studied here, by working with it ourselves, reflecting. This is called the wisdom of reflecting. And then we need to get that what we have reflected upon, that we have understood, onto a deeper level by meditating. Wisdom for meditation, yeah? Cultivating that wisdom such that it goes to a deeper level, that it integrates into us. So this is what you would do actually with a mind as powerful as possible. So for example, you would do a meditation, let's say a meditation retreat. So in this retreat, you would do all kind of other practices. You would do motivation practices. You would do maybe practices where you are visualizing the Buddha in front of you in order to have a source of inspiration. You would maybe practice generosity with regard to that Buddha, or do purification meditation. All that in order to energize this mind that is now going to meditate on wisdom. Yeah. So there's a great many things done in order to work with the mind to make it very suitable for this actual wisdom of meditation. And one of these factors that makes the mind very suitable, very powerful, is concentration. Yeah, a scattered mind will not be very powerful, will not achieve a lot. Yeah, that's, for example, if you would like to work with anger, for example. And so the one way to work with anger is either to develop patience or to develop compassion or love for the person with which you have this anger situation. So if you want to counteract that habit of being angry with that person by doing, let's say, a love and compassion meditation. So that's one of the antidotes, or if you could say the temporal antidotes for anger or for hate even. But if you sit down and do this meditation and you're constantly thinking about what you're going to do afterwards, or your phone is ringing and stuff, and you take the call actually in the middle of your meditation, yeah, then this meditation will not go anywhere because the mind is very, very weak. Yeah? It is not energized, it is not concentrated. So concentration is therefore a very central topic in Buddhism. Actually, it's a very vast topic. Yeah, we study about this all the time. Comes not studying about it all the time, but in our studies it pops up again and again. This topic. You hear about all kind of very high forms of concentrations that high-level bodhisattvas are still practicing and so forth, and how there's even within samsara rebirth forms which are solely concentration. Yeah, there's beings that don't even have a body; they're just in a state of concentration. So this kind of concentrations are seemingly possible in our mind. Right now we are studying Tantra, and what we hear here in Tantra about concentration is just mind-blowing, yeah, amazing. Anyway, concentration is definitely a very central topic for Buddhism. I would even say it's a central topic for India. So even Hinduism and Jainism would probably talk a lot about that. It is also said that concentration is not necessarily something Buddhist. Yeah, so you can obviously do concentration practices in all these different religions. You don't have to have faith in the Buddha and so forth. It's just a practice that is simply a side of our mind that we can concentrate it more and more and more to levels which we right now cannot even comprehend. So you don't have to be Buddhist. So in order for it to be a higher training in concentration, it definitely would have to be a Buddhist practice and therefore be based on refuge, understanding of reincarnation and so forth, understanding that, or having the faith or having the understanding that the Buddha is the one who has a path out of samsara and not so much other teachers. So on that basis, you take refuge in the Buddha and so forth. So then on this basis, you can generate such a higher training in concentration. So I'm saying all of this in order to say, why do we need a higher training in wisdom? And why would we need a higher training in concentration in order to get a higher training in wisdom? Yeah. So just to recap, you would have to have this wisdom because that's the actual counteraction to our ignorance, which is the source of all our afflictions, of all our karma, of all our samsara. In order to be liberated from samsara, you need to destroy ignorance, and it all is wisdom. The ignorance is on a very deeply ingrained, deep down level. So if you want to counteract it, we have to counteract it down there. We have to bring the wisdom to this level. This will not happen by just sitting in a discussion. This will not happen by doing a very distracted meditation. It will happen in a meditation that is very powerful, a meditation that is very, very concentrated. And to some extent, you could say that all of Buddhism, being Hinayana or Mahayana, is all about this wisdom reaching the point where it can actually destroy the ignorance. And to reach this point, you actually discuss simply all kind of different powerful minds that can realize wisdom. So this can be either a very concentrated mind. Enchanted will be a mind that is dealing with inner processes in order to get more subtle, more powerful minds and so forth. There's even practitioners who would use the process of death, and within death, they would be so in control of the process that getting to subtler and subtler minds, more and more powerful minds, they would use these minds of death in order to realize wisdom. So it's all about realizing wisdom. The question is just, what kind of powerful mind can I generate to aid that wisdom? So the first step definitely is concentration. So that's why we have this a higher training of concentration preceding the higher training in wisdom. So then therefore the question comes, what conditions do we need in order to generate concentration? And so concentration obviously wants to pacify and make the mind single-pointed on a rather high level or advanced level. So as concentration tries to bring about this pacification, we need to first deal with the absolute coarsest levels of disturbance in the mind, which is kind of non-ethical thoughts, non-ethical behaviors, non-ethical ways of using our language, our body, and so forth. So to some extent, this ethics is actually a form of doing a first step of pacification of the mind. And of course, you have many different levels of ethics, but it definitely starts with the coarsest levels of our of negative behavior. So we need to be free of that in order to control the coarsest of the afflictions, so that then in a concentration meditation, these coarsest afflictions are not disturbing our meditation on concentration. Yeah, so ethics is, again, not just in Buddhism, but also in other systems, the absolute basis for the generation of concentration. Yeah, so that's this connection. If we would be ethics obviously is talking about how we are living our lives. Yeah, it's talking about our behavior, what kind of person we are, how we are interacting with others, and so forth. So therefore, it is talking about almost any moment in our life, and we are talking about behavioral patterns that we are using all the time. So they are very much ingrained. the negative ones and the positive ones, whatever is our present state of character and of how we do things. So due to the afflictions being rather strong in us here in samsara, probably we have a lot of negative attitudes as well, and we probably practice them every day. So every day we do a meditation practice, a cultivation practice of negative states of mind. So they really are very deeply ingrained, and they will therefore also pop up in our meditation. That's what a normal experience of people in meditations, be it concentration meditation or other meditation, is that the mind is trying to run off to some exciting object or to something that is entertaining. It can be that the mind is entering into criticizing others because it's some entertainment. At least it doesn't have to concentrate on this object. Or it goes into, I don't know, jealousy, or maybe it goes into, oh, I'm such a wonderful person because I'm doing this meditation. I'm really outstandingly spiritual. So it goes into arrogance. So these patterns will come up in the meditation as well. So in order to calm down at least the coarsest of the coarse in our mind, we try to change our daily behavior, the way how we are interacting with others. So that's already quite a practice, actually. And to some extent, you could say this is meditation in itself. Not necessarily concentration meditation, but it is meditation itself, because what you're doing is you try to cultivate an awareness of what's going on in your mind. You try to cultivate a discernment where you are understanding that indeed some things in your mind are pretty nasty. And then you try to cultivate a counteracting force. You recognize that this pattern is, this negative pattern is working out right now, and you want to stop it. And so there's two stages. One stage is that you stop it. You just interact. You just kind of stop the pattern from going on, and just freeze, if you like. And the other one is that you're actually counteracting it by way of cultivating a different attitude in the situation. So in both cases, what you need is that a corner of your mind is checking about what you're doing, what you're thinking, how you're feeling right now, what kind of state are you in, what kind of physical state, verbal state, mental state, and so forth. I'm having a phone call from a brother of mine. He just doesn't take it that I'm switching it off here. So that's where I see that it is actually a form of meditation if you do ethics in your daily life, because with the corner of your mind, you have to check your behavior. You have to check what you're doing. And you need to react within this understanding, within your daily life. And that's quite possible. Like sometimes we might have an understanding of our mind as being very kind of singular, or very kind of or a very simple phenomenon. But actually the mind is very complex. You can do that. You can be in a conversation and talk with the other person and follow the conversation and think about how you're interacting with the other person, and at the same time, without losing the conversation, checking what's going on in your mind, in the corner of your mind. So it's almost like having two minds. So this is not a strange concept anyway, because we already have many different types of mind. We have like an eye consciousness, an ear consciousness, a tongue consciousness. So we have 5 sense consciousnesses altogether, and they all doing something different, and they all have different experiences. It's a different thing to experience a sound from experiencing a color or a shape. And what you're doing right now is you're focusing on the screen, and you're experiencing sound and shape at the same time. So you have an experience through the eyes and experience through the ear at the same time. Probably you also feel a certain temperature in the room and so forth there. So you have a tactile consciousness, and what else? Maybe there's a certain fragrance in the room. Maybe you made some offerings before, like, I don't know, some incense, I don't know. So all of this is operating at the same time. And these are distinct minds. They have their distinct perceptions. They have the distinct objects. They have this distinct liking or disliking. For example, you might see a certain shape and you like it, and at the same time hear a certain sound and dislike it. Yeah? So even that's possible, that you have different minds having a liking or a disliking in the same moment, in your experience. And further on, you can even have several thoughts going on at the same time. This is something that is very apparent for those that are, let's say, trying to do a certain practice. Let's say they do a certain mantra practice. So they sit there and they say, recite mantras, and they try to focus on the mantra. And at one point, they find out that they are thinking about something else. But also they're doing the mantra. But the mantra is not pronounced by itself. It is because there's a mental activity that is then using the speech organs to express this mantra. So there is a mental activity that brings about the mantra recitation, and at the same time is a different mental activity that is thinking about something else. So you can even have two different mental minds going on at the same time. Of course, you will normally have one of these minds predominating, and they will kind of focus more than others. The others will be more kind of latent, or will be kind of not very sharp, or not very strong. But still, there is these different minds going on at the same time. So I'm just mentioning all of this to say that it is completely possible and completely normal to be able to interact with somebody or to do something, and without stopping that, you can check in what kind of frame of mind or what kind of feeling you are right now. For example, if you have a conversation with somebody, then it's commonplace psychology even that you can sometimes check your body posture. How are you sitting there while you're talking with the other person? Yeah? You can check if you're looking on the floor while you're talking with the other person, or if you look in the eyes of the other person. You can check if you are sitting with your arms crossed over your heart, over your chest, or if you are sitting open there and so forth. So obviously you wouldn't have to stop talking with the other person while checking your body posture. So this is a clear case where a certain activity, which is, according to Buddhism, always driven by the mind, is going on uninterruptedly, while a part of the mind can check what's going on. What body posture do I have? What body language, therefore, I have? How is the tone of my voice while I talk with the other person? What kind of words am I using? What else? How do I feel right now while I'm talking with the other person? Do I have some pressure on the chest, for example? Do I feel defensive? Am I open? Am I interested in what the other person is saying? You can check all of these different levels while continuing a conversation with the other person. And of course, this is also true for any other situation, yeah? While you do work, while you do studies and so forth. And with this corner of your mind, you can check how you feel. Where are you going with all of this? Yeah? Does it make sense to you? Are you happy, if you like? You can check if you're happy. So actually, this should be a very central thing to check anyway, because the very foundation of Buddhism is this statement of the Buddha that everybody wants to be happy, nobody wants to suffer. So if that is the case, I think on the one hand, it's good to check this at times. If this is the case, do we want to be happy and not to suffer? And then on the other hand, to check, how is it going? Are we happy? Or are we maybe bored or suffering, or even stronger, lonely, or feeling cut off, or angry, or something like that? But to check. So that's kind of a very essential part of any kind of spiritual, maybe even psychological progress. I guess you could call this awareness, to get aware what's going on in your life. And that means mainly what's going on in your mind, in your feelings. Yeah? So mind, of course, in Buddhism is a broader topic. Mind is not just talking about memory and intelligence and so forth, but is also including all the emotions. So there's not kind of body, mind, emotion or feeling, but there's kind of, if you like, there's the body and there's the mind, and there's a strong interaction between the two. But the mental realm is including all the feelings and the moods and what have you. So that's something that we can get aware of by, as it is said, by using a corner of our mind. Um, so that's something that we can get aware of by, as it is said, by using a corner of our mind. Um, so that's something that we can get aware of by, as it is said, by using a corner of our mind. Um, so that's something that we can get aware of by, as it is said, by using a corner of our mind. Um, so that's something that we can get aware of by, as it is said, by using a corner of our mind. And so that's how you would try to practice ethics. Yeah? You need to, first of all, become aware of what you're doing in daily life, what you're going for, how you interact with others, what you do to others. Are you helpful, or are you helpful sometimes, but many times you are kind of too busy, or something like that? Yeah? So are you rejecting? Are you defensive when people ask you and so on? So, or checking all these kind of things that are happening to you during the day, and then becoming aware of your patterns and what you're doing. Then to check this against what would be a different way of doing things. And then that would mean you would find kind of an alternative behavior and then try to replace a kind of a harmful or a negative behavior by way of a positive behavior. And that's actually not so easy as it sounds, because we have a lot of justifications in our mind for all the things that we're doing. Yeah, so maybe on one level we know that this is actually harmful for the other person, or it's not really kind of nice, or not really friendly, or it's really harsh what we're doing there, but this had to be done because this. So it will take some time to even kind of identify what kind of behavior is going on. And then sometimes this kind of behavior is so much our default of how we deal with certain situations, that even if we find out that this is kind of a negative behavior or a harmful behavior, or not the best way to deal with the situation, we couldn't think about an alternative. Yeah, so this is really a second step to think about how to replace that behavior by something more conducive. Like, let's say, what could be? Somehow you are dependent on somebody, let's say in work or something, you're dependent on somebody else doing his or her work in order for you to be able to do your work. And the other person is constantly kind of making mistakes and so forth. And you go over and you put this into the face of the other person, rather angry. You can go on with your work because the other person is not doing his part. And you go over and tell this to the person, very, very angry. And so when the other person even sits there kind of feeling like beaten or something, and gets very defensive and so forth. So maybe at one point you become aware that this is actually harming the other person. But the fact is that you need the work done by the other person. And it might simply not appear to you, how else could I address that person in order to make that person do his or her job so I can continue with mine, apart from screaming at the person? What other possibility would there be? Yeah, so it might not appear immediately to you. So you have to search. And the different method might be quite different. And maybe you have to walk down a completely different path than up to now. It might not be enough just to change some words. For example, you might have to go so far to inquire what's going on with you. Is everything all right in your life? Why are you not able to bring about this work? Or are you distracted by anything? So you might have to go for not just kind of using a different way to make the person work, but actually you might have to inquire into the life of the other person. I'm just saying this as an example. I'm saying that it's sometimes not so obvious what, like you might get so far that you understand a certain behavior is harsh, let's say, or is harmful to the other side, but you don't know how to replace it by something else. I had an experience like this once. I mean, probably I should have this experience more often, but but this one was one that stuck out for me. So I'm always telling this in this kind of context. I was dealing with somebody that I was experiencing as being very, very arrogant and very, very bossy. And my normal pattern that I found out to deal with this is to verbally lash out on the other person, to show the arrogant person its place, to make the other person shut up. Because that's really what I wanted from the bed, was not about the other person to shut up. And then it came so far that I thought to myself, that's not really Buddhist. that's not a good thing to do. You should not do that. So stop that. And so this became very clear to me. So that's good. And I didn't know what else to do with this person. Apart from lashing out on this person verbally, I did not have any other pattern. It was the only pattern I had. So I just had to shut up myself and sit there, well, to some extent helpless. Didn't know what to do. No other pattern was presenting itself for this situation. The other pattern was presenting itself like that, like drinking water, very easy, super ingrained. So that's interesting. That was really a cool experience for me, that you not only need to understand what is a negative behavior, you need to also understand what is a positive behavior. You need to get skilled in dealing with difficult situations. Yeah, so in one way, of course, there is always situations where you actually, let's say, perceive somebody as arrogant, but the person is actually not arrogant. That's your projection. But as a matter of fact, there is arrogant people. Like if we can understand that we are arrogant sometimes, then probably other people can also be arrogant sometimes. So this is simply a fact. This happens at times. So how do you deal with that? What's a virtuous, positive way of dealing with arrogant people? A non-virtuous way of dealing with them, and maybe successful for in the moment, is to lash out verbally, yeah, until they shut up. Might be successful, might also completely not be successful. But it's definitely harming the other person, and it's definitely harming yourself. It is ingraining a harshness of yourself. It is ingraining a pattern of harming others. It is definitely not improving the relationship. It's probably kind of harming the relationship. Maybe the whole situation, if it's a work situation, and it's maybe influencing the whole team and so forth. So it's definitely not a successful strategy for becoming happy, which is what we all want. We want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. It's a successful strategy for ingraining harshness, ingraining being cut off, ingraining having images of enemies around you. The other person is feeling a harm right there, maybe, and so forth. But it's not a useful pattern for generating something like peace inside or outside, a happy, free mind, a relaxed mind. Still, it's a pattern that is used all the time by many people. And the question is, what would be a different pattern? How to replace that? And as I said, you can be stuck. You can come to a moment where you understand this here is harmful for myself and for the other person. It is not generating happiness, neither in the other person, nor in myself. And you don't know what to replace it by. So therefore, what's my experience with Dharma is that on the one hand, the Dharma is going to point out a lot of things that are actually not going so well in one's own mind, in one's own life. But the Dharma is also coming up with a lot of descriptions of positive ways of using your body, using your speech, and using your mind. And of course, mainly it's going to be about positive ways of using your mind, because once your mind is positive, then your speech will become positive, and also your physical action will become positive. Yeah, so ethical discipline is therefore already talking quite a bit about pacifying the mind. And if we are able to abstain from this kind of coarse or harsh behavior, then the mind, and this will not happen because today you didn't kind of lash out on the other person verbally, therefore now you're ethical and now you can move to the next step of concentration. But it will be something that is to be practiced over many years and in all your life, so that here a certain change in your patterns is happening, and therefore in your personality to some extent. Yeah? Like the changes that we want to do, the transformations with our mind that we want to bring about, will all be gradual. Yeah, we will work on many different levels, but we need to apply, in this case, Buddhist teachings in order to bring about first a change with the coarsest levels of us, and then get access to subtler levels, and then make changes there, and then again to subtler levels, and so forth. In the same way, also the benefit that we get from Buddhism will first be kind of a coarser benefit, and then it will go deeper and become more subtle, and so forth. So here, by practicing ethical discipline in our daily life, then here a certain pacification, a certain transformation of our daily life, of our life in general, can happen, and on that basis, we would become people, beings that are more pacified on the coarsest level, and that will aid our meditation, be it analytical meditation on love and compassion, or be it, for example, on love and compassion, or be it concentration meditation. So if you're somebody who is into concentration meditation in order to do the actual wisdom meditation, then you're really already somebody who is aiming very high, yeah, going for an actual so-called calm abiding. So the calm abiding is a mind that is a single-pointed mind that can abide on a certain object as long as it wants, yeah, without moving. They say if somebody has a calm abiding, you could sound a cannon. You can shoot a cannon next to this person, and he won't be disturbed in his concentration. Okay, that's advanced, I would say. So, so if you want to go, if somebody would go for this level, and there's many higher levels than that of concentration, of absorption, and so forth, in order to be able to use this for the, it's the same one. In order to use this for the development of wisdom, this would be somebody who's already very advanced on the path. This person has practiced ethical discipline for a long time. This person is pacified in many ways already by practicing ethical discipline. So this ethical discipline is really an essential practice in the beginning. It's not something that, like, you might feel like, oh, I'm a good person because if I pay my taxes and I'm getting along with my friends fine, and family is also kind of okay, I'm a good person. That's not what we're talking about. When you get along with your friends, well, I mean, that's why they are friends, right? The question is, how do you get along with your enemies? That's the question. And so the essence of ethical discipline is actually focusing on avoiding to harm others. Yeah, so that's like if you would have a description of ethical discipline, it would come down to that it's a practice of refraining from harming others. So this can take many forms, but this is the actual thing. You don't want to engage your mind, your speech, or your body into something that harms others. Yeah, out of these reasons that I have told you, that it makes the mind, that keeps the mind in a harsh and a coarse state. Will not allow you to go any further with any other practice. They say ethical discipline is kind of the ground on which all the realizations of the Buddha stand, or it can be like a ground, like a fertile soil out of which all the realizations grow, like a harvest and so forth. So this is the absolute basis. Yeah? This is what is to be worked with first. In the Mahayana, you talk about the so-called 6 perfections. So this would be the perfection of generosity, and then of ethical discipline, the second one, and then patience, and then joyous effort, and then concentration, and then wisdom. So they say that these perfections are also placed in this sequence because they get harder and harder. So you can see that ethical discipline is rather in the beginning. Concentration is the 5th one. Wisdom is the 6th one. So they are the real hard ones at the end, when you have already practiced the first 4 to some extent. So that's kind of maybe like a little bit of an introduction to the topic, because of course there's also a lot of technical things to be said about it. Like there's different sets of ethics. There's ethics being, as I just said, is in essence refraining from harming others. So therefore, refraining already sounds a little bit of a bell of certain kind of vows. Yeah, so Buddhism has a lot of different vows. It vows for lay people, has vows for monks, has vows for bodhisattvas, has vows for tantric practitioners. It's actually full of vows, which are all something that you choose to take, like anything in Buddhism. You're choosing to engage into this kind of practice or not. And the actual word for vow is actually a binding, to bind something. It's the word which you would use if you bind something together. It's domba. So domba actually means to bind yourself such that you're not engaging into activities opposite from that. So again, it has this ring of refraining from certain activities. So that's ethical discipline. So if therefore you cannot really kind of practice ethical discipline by sleeping at night in your bed. You're saying like, oh, I never kill people, I'm a good person, I never kill people. Well, you never have the opportunity. Who knows what you would do if you would have a gun, and this would be one of the ways of really solving the problem if you wouldn't shoot. So ethical discipline is in that situation to not shoot when you could. You're stronger than the other person, or you have the advantage of having a gun and so forth. Yeah? So you can decide maybe a dangerous situation in that sense, and you decide to not do it. So that's the practice of ethical discipline, to refrain from negative actions, to refrain from actions that harm. Not that you are in a state where you don't do certain actions because you never have the opportunity, or maybe you're afraid that if you would kill somebody, the police would apprehend you and you would end up in prison. So therefore, that's why you abstain from it, because you're afraid from the consequences out of society. Or you're not hitting somebody else because you're afraid to be hit back. So here the idea is that you're generating a mind that abstains from harming others. This is the intention. Yes, so very, really good at that. This would lead now nicely into talking about vows, but I think we already have our hour, if I see this right. Yeah. So that's the idea, to do from now on only an hour. No, that's what I understand from Marius.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yes, because
You do an hour of discussion before, and then I talk for an hour or something. No? Yeah, cool. Yeah. We have some minutes left. We could use them for dedication, which I would strongly recommend. Or if you have any question out of this, I could also take a question or two. Or maybe you want to leave it for next time. I don't know.
I don't know, maybe some topics for our. Okay. And maybe you can, I don't know, suggest some topics for us to discuss.
Yeah, so maybe you could just discuss amongst each other what is your understanding of ethics right now? What do you think is ethics? Yeah, or maybe like maybe to explore what normally we think about when we think about ethics. Yeah, what's ethical behavior normally? For example, is there something like ethics for a non-Buddhist? Do you have to believe in reincarnation in order to be ethical? Yeah, and if not, then what would be Buddhist ethics? What's special about Buddhist ethics? Is there something special about Buddhist ethics, or is it just the ethics of everybody else? And then maybe you can discuss this, what I have just said here now in the end, that you're not an ethical person because you don't kill while sleeping, or because you don't kill while working in the office and being very much ingrained in your work or something like this, or while eating or something like this. But only if you are having an opportunity, and in that you abstain. Which for us probably most of the time is more about verbal opportunities. That we are doing this with our things. So think about that, like this very description of ethical behavior, ethical discipline as being abstaining from harming others. when you have to really abstain in a situation where you could harm others.
In any kind.
Hmm?
Not and in any kind, not only physical.
No, in any kind, with body, speech, and mind. You're harming the other person in any way. So harm so that the other person is feeling some suffering, or at least you're intending that the other person is feeling some suffering. Yeah. So again, then you would have to explore a little bit like what is the suffering. Yeah, it's not just kind of wounding the other person or actually beating with a stick. Yeah, but what about getting a verbal beating and so forth? Yeah, so explore this idea of abstaining from harm. What is harm? In what situations can you actually abstain? What is the actual practice of ethics? Yeah, that's one thing. And the other thing, what is ethics in general, like outside of Buddhism, or what do people normally understand when they say ethics? Okay.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if you've got questions, please.
What's that? What was the last thing?
I asked them if they got questions.
Uh-huh. But being good Romanians, they don't have questions. That's good. Cool.
No,
Well, you have the discussion.
That's a problem with this.
All right. So maybe we can just kind of, for a moment, calm down and breathe for a second, and then just dedicate a bit. So try to sit upright and in a comfortable position. And then we can think, may any kind of understanding that I generated tonight grow deeper and become a part of me, so that it can start to work into my daily life and into my daily experiences and how I interact with others. And may I be able to deepen my understanding about this topic in the future, so that I can liberate myself to more and more happiness and freedom in my own mind. And then also share this to other people, to help other people appropriately, if there's an opportunity for that. And on the basis of this, may this become a stepping stone towards a great spiritual transformation, up to complete liberation from samsara and rebirth and re-death and rebirth and re-death, and even to the complete actualization of my Buddha nature, becoming completely enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
You too.
Bye.
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 Yeah.